Good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are in the world. Just give me a second here. I just want to make sure my mic's coming through. Welcome to Daily Cyber episode number 285. I'm really excited about today's episode. We have a great guest on. One thing I want to remind people as you're going through February, there's a lot going on for a lot of organizations, transitions, projects, things along that line. Make sure you take some time for yourself, have some work-life balance if you can. I know the security IT field is extremely busy, but take some time off, scheduling your PTO, make sure you do that because a lot of times we deal with sprints, a lot of projects, things we're doing with being meetings, dealing with a lot of high stressful situations, depending on what you're on, especially on the cybersecurity side. We're always kind of dealing with a firefighting style. So I want to make sure you guys take care of yourself. If you get into an event, ransomware, business email compromise, something along that line, and you need a break, take a break after it, get back into the fight, get back into the work, because this is the career you chose. This is the career that all of us chose. And you can see the energy that I have coming into this. That's things that I do to take care of myself, eat, exercise, make sure I take care of myself so that I can be there. I can show up for my colleagues, my clients, my customers, things along that line. So just want to live that tidbit for February. I'm hearing more conversations about burnout, cybersecurity, things along that line. Just want to share that you got to really take care of yourself. So today I have a great guest, Jeff Mahony, co-founder and chief architect of RYT Chain. Jeff Mahony is a seasoned technologist and system architect with over 3 decades of experience building scalable, secure solutions at the intersection of finance, services, and technology. As a co-founder of RYT and architect of the chain patent proof of majority consensus mechanism, Jeff is driving efforts to integrate decentralized technologies and Web3 principles into government and enterprise systems, ensuring they remain robust while onboarding the next 1 billion users through nation-level pilots on RYT. So a lot of great knowledge, a lot of great information we're going to cover today. So grab a coffee, grab a tea, and let's hack at it. So one quick correction for myself. It's right, not RYT. It's right chain. Thanks, Jeff, for letting me know and reminding me about that. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks, Brandon. But after all that intoxicating, I think I'm going to have to take a break right now. I got to go on PTO.
You're PTO right now? Too much energy.
Too much energy. Fantastic. Great advice. I'm really happy that people are actually talking about that work-life balance. It's really important.
Well, have you been finding that with your team and the people you work, that just the sprints and the amount of work that's coming through?
Yeah, there's a tremendous amount of workload. There's a lot of burnout. There's a lot of information that's going through people's heads, and there's a lot of work that they need to do to accommodate that information. And they find themselves starting to overload on the work side and remove themselves from that sort of family and social side a little bit. So we're always trying to counsel people like, take a break, go see your family, make sure that they know who you are, right? Understand and frankly, go give them love and then come back and you can give love here, right? This is the support cycle that you have. This is the support mechanism that you have. Don't jeopardize it. Make sure that you're fresh and ready. And the thing that is really hard for most people to really grasp is you can work 6-7 hours on something, or you can take a 20-minute nap and work an hour on it. Mm-hmm. And you get the same result, right? So there's some kind of balance that really needs to go. Now it's a personal thing, of course, right? How that balance actually looks, but we're trying to get people to sort of identify what that balance is and then affect it.
It's so true. I mean, I think that's the key to longevity in this career, right? Is that work-life balance, is to take care of yourself. And I mean, as we talked about, kind of before the stream, is a lot of us go through that just sprint. And there's a lot of, 8-hour, 10-hour, 12 hours, 72-hour days, depending on what you're dealing with, where you're going to go through a sprint, but it's worth it because at the end you have some results. You kind of achieve something, you get something done, and then, take a break and then get back into it.
Yeah, I like to take it in chunks, right? So when I was younger, when I was really working the floor and actually programming, endlessly, I was doing 18-hour days and eating McDonald's and Carl's Jr. and crap food all my life, right? Mixing that with Jolt Cola and just trying to sort of stay awake while you're working through these things. But eventually you got to the end, or at least we didn't have sprints 30 years ago. That concept is sort of new in
We just
our
called it work.
space. We just called work constantly until it was done. Right.
That's just my regular shift. What are you talking about? A sprint.
Right.
What is that?
What is this? A sprint? What are you talking about? You get to stop. What? So we did take that break, though. We did sort of enjoy that moment. We did, look at how we pushed that into quality control, and at that point we got a break, right? Okay, it's now sitting in QA. Let's see what they come up with, right? So we had natural breaks sort of built into this, but today you have to be careful, right? You can work long hours, and you have fast evolving problems that you need to stay on top of.
Yeah, so true. Now, we were talking a little bit about work, and one of the questions I had for you, because reading your bio and things, says, how is a proof of majority consensus different from a proof of work and a proof of stake? I know that was kind of one of the comments I was reading through. And then what's specific about cybersecurity threat models was it designed to defend against?
Well, basically, we were trying to look at a couple of different things. How do I actually get through real world utility?
Okay.
Connect with the banks, do it with epics that are short enough, create an answer to the requirements that the banking institutions have. That was number one. Number two, attack vector management. How do you actually manage attack vectoring? Particularly in an evolving space that's now including AI, where it's happening faster and faster.
Mm-hmm.
The fundamental difference is we decided that unlike proof of work and proof of stake, that we should actually be democratic. So that means that every node should participate in producing what is the next block, if you will, for that epic. Then they all get together, they vote through a specific consensus model that we've designed, and the outcome is that you will have a very low energy network coming up with the same answer that a high energy network like a proof of work or proof of stake would come up with. So we wanted to reduce a network energy as well. We wanted to be able to reduce the footprint size and create a node that
Mm-hmm.
didn't have to be differentiated amongst validators, et cetera, and something that could run on a mobile phone, right? So when you're looking at certain attack vectors, you're looking at pure numbers in a distributed network. So there's nothing like the mobile phone network, which is massive in size. If we can run on those types of units, now we can mitigate one of the biggest attack vectoring, which is that 51% attack, right? So lots of designs, concepts we're putting there. We took the sort of existing designs of the layer ones out there, and we said, well, you missed the mark on this requirement, this requirement, this requirement. I can't use this in real world settings. We know the banking industry incredibly well. We have about 7,000 banks that we support, and they have various criteria for how they would actually interact with you. And if you can't meet those criteria, they won't interact with you, which is why you're not seeing current layer ones interoperating with the banking systems effectively. So we just did a full redesign.
Now, how would that relate to currently? Like if I'm looking at the attack vector of endpoints, I know you're talking about nodes. How does that differ?
Well, so we've basically created a self-healing network in the sense where forking is almost impossible to happen in our network.
Okay.
That changes the dynamic in terms of how attack vectoring is managed. So we look at this as if there are good actors, bad actors, and corrupted actors, but those corrupted actors are temporary.
Right.
So how will I let them back into the network if they've proven themselves to be worthy, if you will, of coming back into the network, i.e. the self-healing piece? So you can attack our networks. You can definitely take down nodes. You can certainly create corrupted nodes on your own and inject them into our network. But you'll never be able to actually overwhelm the network. The network will constantly be reevaluating itself and bringing nodes back into the mix. Now, what most people don't do is in any given moment within our gossiping network, about 1/32 of the network is offline. But those nodes that are offline don't know it, right? So we've taken, if you will, this sort of mafia style of approach, right? I mean, really, this is where I got that idea was, okay, well, how does the mafia actually manage bad actors and good actors without actually knowing who's a good actor and a bad actor?
Right.
Well, some of the tenets of the way that they handle this is they'll take their best, we'll call it soldier, and sit him. You're having pasta tonight, buddy. You're not coming with us on this gig.
Right.
And then they'll take other bad actors as they perceive them to be and continue to interact with them as if normal, but watch them.
Right.
And so they may not take their advice. They may pretend like they're taking their advice. And so we followed the same sort of mechanism where at any given moment, there might be a number of nodes that are peers to a particular node that peer node is just simply ignoring. But the other nodes don't know that. And
Right.
so the the result is an approach to almost perfect gossip. You'll never actually achieve that under a logo, et cetera, but you'll be able to get there the preponderance of the time, and certainly within the epic timeframes that we need to operate with banking operations. So I can say with almost certainty that the truth is being manifest in this particular network. And even though you might be corrupting a large number of nodes, I'm still going to get the truth.
So then you'll have exposure, and I'll just use kind of an example because I know some people are going to watch this and think, okay, so if I have a threat actor in the environment, they're looking at doing reconnaissance, data exfiltration, and then on their way out, like an encryption and ransomware, at the end of it. How is your solution going to help that? Or how is this solution that we're seeing kind of in the industry going to prevent that?
Right. So when you have a distributed network, you're not going to see a fully corrupted network. It's impossible to do that.
Mhm.
The AIs might be able to actually mount attacks that are evolving fast enough that you could overrun big chunks of the network. But that network will eventually resolve itself if appropriately established. Ours will do that. It will eventually resolve itself. So the best case that you have in an attack vectoring mechanism is to create essentially a negative fork, a fork in the truth, to create a new truth that's running alongside what is the old truth, if you will. That new truth then competes with the old truth, and now no one knows which one is the accurate record. Ours doesn't allow for that. We will always adopt a single truth no matter what. You would have to overwhelm our networks so fast with so much energy because our epochs are so short in the millisecond time frame that the best you could do is to wipe out a transaction or two, but you couldn't affect a massive change in the network's understanding of what the truth is from a blockchain perspective. So any data that's rolling onto that is almost guaranteed to be accurate. Any data that's rolling out of it as a read is almost guaranteed to be accurate as well.
Mhm.
If you don't think it's accurate, you have an entire network that has the same understanding and has arrived at that understanding on its own. It did not achieve that understanding by conferring with other nodes. So corrupting other nodes that might be peers to it isn't enough for you to corrupt its understanding. So eventually we can go out and we can do a consensus again, if we had to, across the entire network, see what the majority of those nodes thinks is the truth, and it's almost guaranteed to be the truth.
But you're talking more in a sense of data integrity, correct?
Yeah, data integrity is really the paramount focus of this distributed network. So vectoring and attack management on that, sometimes you just let it happen, right? That would be one process. So I needed to create an architecture in which, let's make the assumption that we couldn't keep up with the attack, that we couldn't keep up with the double spend, we couldn't keep up with the corrupted data, that we couldn't keep up with the denial of service, that we actually had to assume that we were going to fail, that our SOC, our securities operations center, was going to fail. How would it affect the network? So we designed it. So again, it was self-healing. It would absorb attacks. It would actually allow corrupted nodes. But again, remember that statement of it would be ignoring certain nodes.
Mhm.
So an attacker will think that it's successfully overrun our network, but they haven't.
So
And so,
we're talking more about data integrity and denial of service attacks
yeah.
versus like data exfiltration. Just kind of clarify that, because I think one of the things that's what the original question was, like, if you had a threat actor come in and start to do reconnaissance and exfiltrate data, Your solution's more about the integrity of the data and making sure it's available when it's needed in the right context. That's my understanding. Is that correct?
That's correct. So we're not as worried about someone absconding with the data. We're looking at a data, a truth, if you will, a trust in the system, and that requires some authenticity. It's also going to require some visibility into that network. So we're
Mhm.
talking about two different kinds of networks. When you're running something at the governmental level, obviously you don't want intrusion. You want to be able to mitigate intrusion. When you're talking about something in the public sector, it's a little bit different. I actually want other actors in an explorer sense to be able to see that data. So I just need to maintain data integrity, but I'm not worried about someone absconding with data, sniffing, whatever that might be, to pull that data out of the system. So two different solutions are
Mhm.
really where you have to play. When you're looking at the governmental deployments, you're obviously looking at data integrity as well as data security. So data security, this is where we will be running other types of security protocols on top of our chain. So access points, building a chain from the ground up to have security embedded into it so that it has the appropriate encryptions, et cetera, can identify and authenticate players that are in the network that actually have the appropriate signatures, et cetera. So all that's managed from a data security standpoint. So data integrity, data security for me are one and the same ultimately.
So then for that, how is that different from what companies are currently doing right now?
Well, so that's the challenge, right? Is you're going to migrate these companies from, let's say, a Web 2 to a Web 3 architecture. You're going to migrate ecosystems of financial services at the country level from a Web 2 to a Web 3 system. What's happening is there's an identity problem that's happening in the old networks, right? So I can spoof my identity more simply than I can in a chain environment. So as long as we are controlling the digital ID system, which we do in most country deployments that we're working through right now I can authenticate the user that's actually coming in. Now, assuming that that user is credentialed properly within our chain, can get through the signatures and security protocols and the encryption protocols, I have a much better chance of actually assuring that that data security is in place. Whereas in a Web 2 solution, I don't have that opportunity. I now have many vulnerable places. I have edge systems. I have layers built on top of these things that create that vulnerability. I have even IoT systems that can actually create vulnerability. When I have an end-to-end solution on a chain where you have an immutable sort of record there, but it also includes the digital ID for those people that are inbound, and then a second version of this that's actually validating those folks before they're let to have access to the data that we want to be secure. Then I have an end-to-end solution that I didn't have before. Instead, in governmental solutions in particular, I have a hodgepodge of solutions. Anytime I have to bridge between a solution,
Mhm.
that's where you have your vulnerability, right? So that's where I'd be attacking if I were a hacker. I wouldn't attack the front layer, the edge. I wouldn't attack the core system. I'd attack where they talk to each other. And so in a blockchain mechanism built into a distributed network as blockchains are designed, it's built in by de facto standard to have multiple nodes running and has already identified a mechanism to maintain security between those nodes. So even though they're communicating with each other, it's not the same sort of bridging atmosphere between two disparate pieces of technology where I am vulnerable. I'm not vulnerable anymore when I have node solutions in a distributed network because it was designed specifically for that. So if I could say it in short terms, I might have a vendor who's created an edge system, and I might have another vendor who's created a core system, and they're talking to each other and interoperating to create a total solution at a governmental deployment or even a large commercial deployment. I don't need to jeopardize or attack one of the edges or one of the cores. I need to talk and jeopardize the API that talks between them, the bridge.
Right.
And that's where I want, that's the vulnerability. That doesn't exist necessarily in a distributed network with blockchain. Yes, it does. It does. You can actually intercede between the communication of those nodes, but you'd have to do it with so many nodes that
Right.
you're back to your standard attack vectoring in a typical deployment in a Web2 deployment, I only have to do it between generally one node and the core.
Right.
Okay, so that's the fundamental difference is I've created multiple pathways, theoretically end to infinite number of pathways that you'd have to actually attack and control before you could overwhelm the system as an upgrade into a Web3 environment.
Interesting. Now, one of the questions, I know you're talking about kind of security adoption here and in the deployment of it. What are the biggest security and governance scalability challenges when integrating decentralized infrastructure into like a government or an enterprise level solution?
Yeah, I think it's the edge pieces again, right? So you're never able to deploy on a massive scale all at once. Right, you're going to have to create hybrid solutions. And so you're going to start at the core. You're going to begin bringing systems in that are necessarily the edge pieces. That might be some form of a digital wall. It might be some social service. It might be something that's done at the security level for police or some kind of military application. It might be something that's happening at the governmental level that requires a specialized piece of software to actually handle that. Its core, if you will, for data management is probably some kind of clustered database somewhere. And then there's some kind of bridge between these databases in order to affect essentially a syncing of between those databases. You can't replace the whole system at one time.
Right.
So you're going to have to go through and replace pieces while recognizing that certain edge pieces that have not yet been replaced are going to create vulnerabilities for you. How will you manage that? So in concert with that deployment, you're going to have to stand up specialized SOCs that are just watching those edge systems. You're going to have to be looking at a hybrid between Web 2 and Web 3 security protocols and how you're going to be managing those. And you're going to have to be layering on top of this some kind of AI for at least threat detection, if not threat management, and to keep up with the different ways that we're going to be able to attack a now hybrid system. So what's going to happen is you have to pay special attention to these larger systems across a variety of different channels that would otherwise tax any sort of integration team or tax any kind of SOC team, right? So your response team is not going to be able to manage across both of those. So you're going to have to at least temporarily heighten or increase the size of your response teams and the technologies that they're using to mitigate and detect those responses. So there's a transition period in there where you have a heavy lift on security management, whereas when you finally get to the achieved result where you have a complete turnover in technology solutions, you can back down from that security leveling. Does that make sense?
So when you're doing that, are you saying that that's part of the initial deployment, and then after you get the deployment, everything's live in production, then you'll start to weed down, right, the response, the SOC, things along that line?
Right. So we'll go in and do an initial assessment. First thing we actually deploy is a new SOC that we can watch, that we can begin to integrate what is the Web3 pieces of this.
Right.
Then we begin to deploy our actual technological solution. For us, it's a blockchain. Once we do that, and we're satisfied that we have begun going through this and we're managing risks, so we're putting together red teams, et cetera, so that we can actually see what's happening, create those problems ourselves, and then make sure that we are able to mitigate those. So you see a heightened level of security prior to our actual deployment of our technological solution. Once our technological solution is fully deployed, tested, and signed off, then we'll start to reduce the security protocols and manage a migration from Web 2 to Web 3 completely.
Right. Now, that being said, because you kind of know the banks, the government, they're always looking at these different solutions. Like, why is this important now? Why are they moving to that type of solution?
That's a great question. Unfortunately, what's happening is everybody's getting much more sophisticated in their attack vectoring.
Mhm.
They're mounting bigger and better attacks with the help of AI, and you're starting to see a breakdown in these services, both at the economic level. So if you look at countries like Pakistan, Panama, Costa Rica, and some of these, I won't call them third world, but they're certainly emerging in their technology.
Mhm.
You're looking at 280 million people in Pakistan. It's the fifth largest country on the planet. It's being infiltrated daily. Terrorists are coming in, they're infiltrating visa management systems. They're basically pretending to be and are achieving visas. When you look at places like Panama, you have the wayfarer's passport. Most people aren't aware of this, but every person on a boat that comes through that Panama Canal, for example, has some new form of a passport that lets them go onto the docks. They don't have to go through a customs sort of procedure that the rest of us have to go through.
Mhm.
It's paper. It's easy to break, right? So now
Right.
you're seeing terrorists show up on there. So we have very vulnerable pieces of our operational chain on a worldwide basis that are easily broken, and they are being broken. And these companies, I'm sorry, these countries are using companies that are basically embarrassing the country. So if you look at Panama, for example, they recently had some major problems at the ports and at the Panama Canal because of this seafarers sort of pass. The United States stepped up and said, you must fix this or we will take control of the Panama Canal again, right? So now you're seeing an impetus to push these governments into much better solutions. They need something that's unchangeable. They need an immutable solution. They can't
Mhm.
have something that's easily corrupted like a SQL server. Just once you have access, I can change records at will. I can't do that in a blockchain environment. So they're starting to look at that in a very serious way. The other side of that is you're seeing these big countries take loans from the IMF, right? They're taking these giant loans, and the IMF is saying, okay, we're giving you these giant loans. We want visibility into your system. The more visibility you give us into the system, the more favorable our rates will be.
Right.
And this is important when you're borrowing billions and billions of dollars. That rate is significant. So they don't have, in most countries, the ability to actually bring that data to the forefront for the IMF. If they actually had a mechanism where the IMF was just an explorer sitting on a node somewhere and watching what was happening based on this secured and hardened network, but had visibility into everything that was going on, they'd give them the most favorable rates. So governments are looking at these things saying, okay, what's the trade-off? I get a favorable rate on multi-billion dollar loans, which in and of itself is hundreds of millions of dollars in interest, or I spend tens of millions of dollars for an upgrade and then continue to make that spend each year to finish those upgrades. It's a no-brainer. The math says upgrade. So
Right.
this is why we're starting to see this upturn. Is in this nutshell, countries are getting embarrassed, they're getting hacked, they're getting infiltrated, and they're having devastating effects. And then you have monetary funds and other banking enterprises and money flowing in as either grants or gifts, or various other versions of that that need to be supported. So these countries have to move to a new solution.
And I think, like you said, I think it's really important when you're looking at data integrity, right? You look at identity theft, integrity, you look at passports, you look at immigration, like all the things that we're seeing even on the news in the States, right? Like all these essential documentations and integrity of the documents all through. I totally agree. Like when you're looking at any organization, I know we're talking about like finance, government, but all this data is important to make sure the integrity of the data stays as it is. What you put in the system is exactly what you're going to get back out. You
Yeah.
know, I know we
No,
talked about.
you absolutely have to do that, right? There's so many different versions of this that proliferate through a country level deployment. Costa Rica, for example, loses $30 billion a year to fake officers who steal weapons, uniforms, and vehicles.
Right.
Now, how do they get in? How does a fake officer appear? Well, they go through a credentialing system in Costa Rica to become an officer and be employable so that they can actually be in the workforce and eligible to be employed as a police officer. Turns out the educational system is completely corrupted. I can buy that certificate and now I can be a police officer. And then they
Okay.
abscond with $30 billion worth of equipment each year. $30 billion, that's a lot of money. What would it take them to solve that? Not 30 billion. It would
Right.
take them, let's call it 10, 20, 30, 100 million, whatever that number actually works out. It's still worth it to them to actually make that happen. So data integrity and the ability to validate data is hyper important. Panama has another problem. They have a socialized medicine like Costa Rica does. except the people that are actually using that socialized medicine aren't actual citizens.
Right.
They're faking this. They have fake IDs. They're able to actually come into the system, use this technology, and there's no mechanisms to validate them as they begin to use socialized medicine or other services, hyper expensive to those smaller countries. Right? So there's a lot of need, if you will, for the data integrity and the ability to validate that it hasn't been changed, and that, in fact, in the case of identity, the person in front of you is actually the one that you think it is. And
Right.
that doesn't happen in today's systems. It's so easy to fake that, particularly, it's not just the paper networks, right? It's the ability to go in and silently hack into a system that is underserved because you have large government deployments in, let's call it, emerging countries who don't have the security protocols in place necessary to affect and mount a defense. Instead, you have this ability to go in and make these quiet, silent changes, either through social engineering or through direct database manipulation. And the result is billions in loss.
Right.
That's devastating to small countries.
Oh, 100%. And I think one of the things you're talking about, like you look at the global attack surface, right? And how they can go into these different countries. And again, like you said, I agree, don't call them the third world countries, but the ones that don't have the security controls and IT systems in place to manage and harden their environments, they're more likely to be compromised. Right.
Yeah, and the broader your deployment is, I mean, let's take Costa Rica as an example. I like using them. There's only 6.5 million people there.
Mm-hmm.
But they're experiencing $30 billion losses, as I said, just in their police force. So these are still large economies. We may consider them to be small economies when you're comparing them to the rest of the world, but let's not kid ourselves. Those are massive amounts of money that are actually still moving through that 6.5 million citizens, right? Having said that, they can barely keep buses running. So do you think they're actually hardening all their systems? Somewhere is a system that's vulnerable to them. That's where you attack. Now, you can silently take hundreds of millions from a country like that. They wouldn't really be able to even recognize that that's being stolen. It would take them years to figure this out. You'd be long gone. And so why attack the United States when you can attack somebody like Costa Rica?
Right. And I
Easy.
get that. I think that when you deal with, and I'm sure you have dealt with incidents, a lot of times it's the perception of the U.S. too, in Canada, North America, having a lot of money, we're less, they're more, we'll go after them. It's a part of our business model and ethics to be able to do that. They're not going to lose out. And I've heard conversations in threat actor negotiations and stuff like that, where it's literally that, right? It's literally that, right? There is no hard feelings. It's the U.S. They have money. Like they're billion-dollar, trillion-dollar business companies, organizations, things along that line there. Like they have money, we don't. So we're going to go after them. So I think there's that psychological aspect, right?
Sure.
On top of the technical. And I think when you look at other countries like Costa Rica, I think they're seen more as third world countries, and people are more sympathetic not to attack them because they don't have anything. They're not, they're going to take more impact. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying crime doesn't happen, things don't happen, but I think the overall perception is that way, right? So that's why you see like more larger attacks to larger countries, cities, things like that. Now, don't get me wrong. You have state actors hacking, things like that. That's a whole different conversation.
Yeah, I think that's the real threat that we're going to be experiencing soon is it's the state level hacking,
Mm.
right? These massive teams that are put together, they're incredibly well funded, that have all the best hardware, have everything that you can imagine at their disposal. It's those that you're worrying about, really. I mean, when you start thinking about quantum computing and other things like that, we're still in our infancy, but who's going to be the first to actually acquire that type of technology? It's going to be the government. It's going to be these state issued hacking agencies who are designing cybersecurity threats as an attack against another country instead of warfare on the field. It's going to be, obviously, it's in the hardware and technology side. We already know that, but it's not going to ultimately be these corporations or this individual. We tend to think of some guy sitting in his mom's basement who's hacking everything, right? That's not true. That's not what's actually happening, right? What's actually happening is state-sponsored hacking They're going to go after these countries. They're not looking necessarily to take money. They're looking to undermine. They're looking to destroy and corrupt and create problems for a society and its economic standing. And that is something that's a bit different. At the governmental level, it starts with simple things. Let's poke around the edges like we would traditionally do as a hacker. Let's find some vulnerabilities. Let's go ahead and quietly disrupt social services and see if we can get away with it. Let's start to poke around and understand where the vulnerabilities are that we might be able to exploit and move into bigger systems, right? So there's that tenuous sort of reach into our systems that is just enough. Let's poke around. Let's not really touch anything. Let's hopefully not create any triggers or alarms in there. Let's see what's already open. And let's figure out how we can actually just get a foot in the door. And then from there, we can go huge. What's going to actually figure that out for us? It's not going to be a human being. They're not going to be able to detect those little things. They're not going to see it fast enough. They're not going to be able to manage or sift through the amount of data that would be required to see that. That's where AIs are going to come in.
Mm-hmm.
But those same AIs are the ones that are actually doing the poking, right? So there's a quiet poking going on. So we're just seeing a new escalating war like we've seen over the last few decades. I hardened this, you figure out a new way to get in, I harden against that. It's the same thing. AI is just the next generation, if you will, of approach. But who's using it, right? That's who we need to really be focused on. And so to your point, do I want to attack the US? I don't personally, of course, but
Right.
as a hacker, right, where would I see the most benefit to me? Where might I see the most value gain? Well, I might see it in the US because it's a bigger pool I can quietly hide, right? I can pull a substantial amount of money or value of some sort and no one will know.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if I do it against a smaller country, you'll start to see this, right? So we work with Pakistan in particular, and India and some other surrounding countries with some of their major problems. Pakistan, 280 million people. It's a big, giant economy. It's the fifth largest, as I mentioned, in the world landscape in terms of population. You can bury all kinds of things in there before they figure it out, right?
Right.
I can tell you that their visa system just went offline for 3 weeks.
Right.
They didn't tell the world. The reason it went offline is because they got hacked, right? So there's
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me.
yeah, and it's a vulnerability that people and city states and states will exploit, and we have to be prepared for that, and we're not. But to your earlier question, moving to a blockchain gives you an opportunity to understand where the changes occurred, right? Instead of
Mm-hmm.
having a SQL server that I can just rewrite records, right? Yes, there's a log, et cetera. But I mean, when you're talking about massive amounts of information coming through, how would I know that? What kind of validation would I be doing? Well, blockchain has that completely built in.
Right.
It can't be changed. So it's the natural next step for these government agencies in order to defend against what will be that city state coming in with a lot of horsepower.
Now, with that being said, because I mean, you've worked with different countries, different organizations, things like that. What's your biggest, like, top 3 defense lessons?
The biggest defense lessons are it's the overwhelming using IoT. It's the overwhelming using a variety of different, if you will, hardware pieces that seem innocuous,
Okay.
right? That we're not defending against, that we don't understand just the preponderance of devices out there are so prolific that it's very difficult to track. You can't see what's actually happening within those. The monitoring softwares that we have in place today can, yes, look at that, but can they look at tens of thousands of units? Are
Right.
they even set up that way? When you deployed something, let's say that you had an office manager somewhere who just took it upon themselves to start deploying hardware because they were sick and tired of not getting answered from, the government agency that's been tasked to help them, and they just start deploying things. It's not being monitored, and all of a sudden it becomes a vulnerability, right? So, if I might, it's the uneducated person on the ground who is deploying hardware and software that they're not authorized to deploy that actually becomes a vulnerability.
Right. That's kind of, well, I mean, in most organizations, I'm going to talk about level setting. Small organizations, you get that more, there's less controls. As you get up to the large and enterprise, generally that shadow IT, which, they're normally monitoring the network for suspicious or rogue devices, things like that. They'll, disable the port, whatever that may be. But I think, like, to your point is, that is it, as you get like TVs, you get stoves, fridges, air units, HVAC, you name it. Like, all these have like IoT connected to IP addresses that they can broadcast and scan and give updates and reports. You can remote connect and control whatever. Like, it's pretty
Yeah.
crazy.
Well, it becomes just a minefield. There's no. We can have monitoring systems. We can certainly go out and explore the network. We can do that real time. We can see what's been connected that shouldn't be connected. Um, but ultimately, it's a person
Mm.
that has to actually look at that data. Now, hopefully, it'll be an AI that'll sift through that data and start to recognize these things faster. Like, let's really talk about that just for a quick second. I connect a series of hardware pieces to this network. Some get discovered right away, some don't.
Hmm.
Okay, I've got a temporary on ramp for an attack vectoring that may go away rapidly, but all I have to do is keep sort of poking through the network and managing my own internal resources, hopefully using an AI where I can actually start to segregate and then assess and redeploy those same assets to any new vulnerability. So you're talking about a human being seeing some kind of panel that's got a red light on it, in effect saying, hey, new device entered the system. Let's go check it out. Okay. But
Right.
before that actually happens, or before they actually go check it out, I'm already in.
Right.
Right. And once I can plant something as simple as a Trojan horse, leave it there for a little while, never let it wake it up, a year later, and nobody knows the better. Right. So, and I don't have to do this on a new device. I can come in on a new device, temporarily plant it somewhere, drop that, come back in a year after things have sort of settled down, access an old device that doesn't get picked up on this new network scan, and go ahead and start my attack vectoring again.
Right.
Right. So there's so many different ways that we can actually handle this, but it's the proliferation of devices that are creating that vulnerability. Unlike a blockchain, which is designed to be a proliferation of nodes by
Hmm.
its definition. Those nodes are specifically designed to work together to manage attack vectoring as a whole. Right. So if I compromise, a refrigerator or a printer or whatever IoT device is sitting on your network that you really didn't notice or didn't care about, I can now move instead to some kind of node and try to attack that. That node won't respond. It won't
Right.
allow that to happen. So there's a lot of benefit of moving to a blockchain away from these multitude of devices. So if, however, I allow for this device management to come on, I actually recognize devices coming into the system. I reject those devices as they come into the system. I don't have much to worry about if my data is being managed in a blockchain environment. Although you might be able to get into the system and touch that system, you still don't have the credentials to actually walk through that data. And that's something different. So we have to segregate in our own minds, like, there's access and then there's the ability to read once I have access. Those are two different things in a blockchain environment.
Right. Makes
And so
sense.
that
Now, go ahead.
no, I was just going to say, I mean, I think there's a distinction that has to be made there. And so that's why, from our original conversation, let's call it a half an hour ago, I was more concerned about data integrity than I was data security at that moment. Right. Make sure that it's correct, can't be corrupted. Step number one, always maintain the truth. Step number two, now maintain that truth in secret if you're working in a governmental installation. In a public
Totally.
setting, I don't want that.
I think it depends on the organization, the compliance too, because they might, right? They might need it for certain things, certain data points that they want. They need the integrity of that data. They need it protected, and they need to be able to audit against it.
Yeah, absolutely. So the way that our chain has been is designed is obviously you can create subchains, right? Those
Right.
subchains can have their own credentials. They can be using the main chain for validation, for identity checking, whatever it might be, or for nothing. And so they can actually use these side chains, if you will, to create different sort of isolated networks that have their own data sets, their own security protocols, their own encryption protocols, et cetera. So not only can I segregate away from any public landscape, but I can segregate even my own divisions from each other. So the corporate environment is taken care of there in that sense, while at the same time still having a natural bridge built into it that doesn't require some third-party API or an integration effort. Instead, it's built into the chain. So if we think about this, step back for a moment, I can have a top-level chain with subchains underneath it. Those subchains don't necessarily need to talk to each other, because I want to maintain data security and data integrity, but I want to do it for a silo within my corporation instead of a governmental agency. But every once in a while, I need them to talk to each other. Normally, in a Web2 environment, I would create some kind of API and let them talk to each other. The vulnerability, that's where it becomes vulnerable. Instead, in a blockchain environment properly established as a layer one solution, I will actually have that communication go through the parent chain, the main chain, and I will still be maintaining my security integrity and my data integrity, but allowing these two separate subchains to talk to each other when necessary, while not creating that bridge that is the vulnerability.
Right.
So that's where we need to be going, is looking at, again, where are we vulnerable? Devices, you asked the question, what are the top three? The devices are part of it. Third party integration is part of it. Any kind of bridge, whatever you call it, an API for communication, even if it's a file exchange, an EDI, some kind of FTP, whether secure or not, whatever that exchange looks like, that's the vulnerability. That's the easiest path to get in. So you need to secure those things. Very difficult to secure that, right? I'm taking data from third parties, for example. What do I do with that? Yeah, I can sequester that. I can try to normalize it. I can look for any kind of SQL embedded into it. I can do all kinds of filtering, etc. But ultimately, it's still a vulnerability. It's an edge system that I don't control. And I can put all the firewalls that I want onto it, but ultimately I don't control that. And we have to really make sure that we understand what we control, what we don't control. And throwing a firewall and a DMZ and whatever else that is that you think of that you want to put on, and however solutions evolve, it's still a hole.
Right.
So that's where we would be attacked from. Blockchain with subchains that can communicate with each other doesn't allow for that. You can now work in a corporate environment. You can sequester data away. Let's say that I wanted to have medical data from a medical institution available to the owner. So nobody's really talking too much about this. We're talking about data integrity, data privacy
Mhm.
now, and we've been working on that. I mean, I think Australia had something back in 1988, right, on data privacy. We have HIPAA compliance, we have SOC 1, 2, and 3, we have SAA 16, et cetera, right? There's a lot of different versions of essentially data privacy and how we would manage that. But what about data control? I own
Right.
that data. That's my data, right? It's about me. So shouldn't I have more control over it? Shouldn't I own it? Shouldn't I be able to decide everything that happens to it? It's easy for us to say that, and it fits our current narratives and our social constructs and where we'd like to see technology move. But how would you do that actually? Like, where would you actually do that? Like, I give my data to a bank, I give my data to, I don't know, a gifting site. I mean, anything innocuous, right? They have that data. And the best thing that I have is some kind of assurance through a disclaimer that they're not going to share it. Now I can have cookies where I get to do certain settings on that kind of stuff, but really don't own that data. Okay.
Right.
In a blockchain environment, I could own it. You can't access it unless I actually let you.
Right.
Now, coming back to that health solution, what if those records by a big giant health provider are made into not a public facing chain, but still secure? But now I'm saying to anybody who comes into that chain, yeah, you can see my data. You can see my data, but you can't. Now I can actually own my data, even though it's housed on somebody else's system. That's what we're trying to afford. And that's where governments are going to. That's where I think commercial and private institutions are going to be going to is how do I actually affect an actual ownership of my data? So far, we don't have any systems that can do that except for blockchains.
Hmm. Well, that makes sense. Totally makes sense. Now, I know we're coming up. It's about 10 minutes left. Last question I have for yourself is like, what is the future of blockchain in 2026?
The future of blockchain. I think the future of blockchain is layer ones that are actually built with security first,
Hmm.
right? They're actually designed from the ground up instead of some sort of add-on to it. This is where you see the layer twos and sort of these other pieces that, to me, they're just sort of add-ons. They're, oops, I forgot something. Let me add something on this. So we'll see that first. I think where you're going to see is a migration to regulatory environments that are cross-border in nature. So right now we have some challenges. In the last decade or so, let's call it 2 decades ago, we had almost no oversight. We had no regulatory oversight. Now we're seeing lots of regulatory oversight from different city states and countries, et cetera. However, none of those match. Right. So
Right.
there's some major challenges there. When you're talking about blockchain and now the world just in general is ubiquitous in nature, you're seeing things and solutions that are going to be cross-border. Well, okay, I've got a technology that operates in the United States and one that operates in Great Britain and one that operates in Germany because it's cross-border and I can't stop those people from accessing. I guess I could for geofencing, but let's say that I opened it up. How am I going to have the same solution interoperating in 3 regulatory environments?
Right.
Right. So that's a big challenge that we're going to have to weed through. That's not necessarily a technical challenge per se. That's going to have to be some kind of overlap between governments and some kind of handshaking consensus that they come to create the best possible legislation and regulatory environment for us to operate in.
Hmm.
I think also we're going to have to start to see something that's more proactive in nature instead of reactive, right? We're starting to see a proactive focus on security holes, just starting to see a real, actual look at this instead of, hey, ooh, I just got attacked. Maybe I should build something to fix that. We're starting
Right.
to anticipate these things, right? We're starting to actually look at how that works. I think we're also going to start to see collaboration, right? Right now, most companies operate in isolation because they're trying to be first to market and they don't want to give away the company's secrets. But I think there's going to have to start to be a core of technologies that is not in isolation, that's more collaborative in nature. We started to see that with open source, but it's not really in a place where we're seeing very large corporations take that on and go, okay, here is the piece that we're all going to use, and then we'll build our layers on top of that. But
Right.
somewhere we're going to have to migrate to that, and that's going to have to happen. It's inevitable. It may happen in 26 is my hope.
Now, what about the integration or at least application of using AI with blockchain?
Yeah, I think that's coming, but all you're doing is creating right now it's a biased solution, if I will.
Hmm.
Right. The biggest challenge that I have with AI, and I've been in the AI space for a while, is it's a sociopath. It doesn't understand right and wrong, right? So it's models that used for learning, however it's acquiring information, and however it's rewriting sort of its subroutines, aren't actually being done in a moral and ethical format. They're
Okay.
really being done in a sociopathic format. The way that we're overreaching that is to say, okay, let's bring some individuals into this. But here's my statement with that. We call that agency in the public forums, but really it's bias, right?
Right.
Each of us has our built-in flaws. All human beings do. I'm flawed, everybody's flawed. Our flaws, however, have a limited effect. They affect just the few people around us. So in a sense, society is buffered from our flaws. But if I have an AI that's operating in a blockchain setting that might be doing something like dating or banking or spirits or whatever
Hmm.
that might be, now you're talking about hundreds of thousands, perhaps millions. maybe tens of millions of people that flaw is now touching. Now, all of a sudden, my personal flaw as I help train this AI isn't buffered anymore. That's scary to me. So we have to look at what that's going to look like in the near term. We're not doing that right now. Right now, we're just trying to race to market, layer AI on top of blockchains, see how it can help us in certain things. And then we're going to discover all these anomalies, and we're going to have to go through a process a year, 2, 3 years from now where we're going to have to pull back and then reassess what it is that we're doing and then redeploy those AIs. I think today they're initially going to be helpful for us from a machine learning standpoint to recognize patterns and other things like that. But I don't want something, quote, AI. I'd rather have a machine learning set of scenarios put in place that will help me and the people around me assess what would be a better process, what would be a better way to achieve the specific result, but not something that's just sort of let run.
Right. And that makes sense. Now, I know we have 5 minutes left in the stream. Anything else you'd like to add or like to say?
Wow, I mean, I have so much. I'm really excited about this time. I'm really excited about what is sort of coming along for these new solutions, what we can do with those new solutions. I'm happy to start seeing some actual problem solving happen. For a long time, we started to see solutions that had no problem, right? And
Right.
now we're kind of pendulum back to, okay, let's solve real world problems, right? Let's figure out how we can actually get the regular subscriber or regular user, the unsophisticated user, into a blockchain environment that's going to benefit them, whether it's cryptocurrencies, whether it's data management for the health services, whether it's economics management, et cetera. How can we actually do something better there? And I'll give you a quick 2 examples. I had a couple of friends come to the table, different conversations. One said to me, look, I balance my checkbook. I've been balancing my checkbook for decades. I'm $67 off this month. I said, okay. And she says to me, I don't know what to do. I said, well, wow, she brought up a good point. I go, call your bank. She goes, I did. And they said, I'm wrong. And that was the end of it. And I'm like, oh, yeah. I mean, you have a single source of truth. A blockchain where other people could look at that. Imagine you had 1,000 friends that could go, nope, you took $67 from her.
Right.
Right. That would
Right.
be one benefit. The other story was somebody, and they were having a medical procedure. I won't disclose what it was. And they said, I got asked all these historical questions. And he says to me, dude, I don't know when I went. I don't know what doctor it was. I don't have the phone number. And no, I don't have the results.
Right.
I'd like to have that information, right? So that's what I want to see happening. And I think we're at the precipice of seeing that, where I can actually own my own health records, where I actually can have more than one truth from a bank. I can have it from a society backing me up. That's what I'd like to see in blockchain. I think we're there.
That's awesome. Now, if anyone wants to get a hold of you, I'm just going to put it on the screen here. I can contact you on LinkedIn just to reach out and connect with you. I'll leave that on the screen for a minute just because it's a longer URL. Thanks so much, Jeff. This was really informative. I mean, it's good to learn about like how this technology is helping with data integrity.
Yeah, I appreciate the time, Brandon. It's been a real fun experience for me. It's always exciting to sort of talk through this, and hopefully we've been helpful to some of your viewers.
Oh yeah, no. And then if you guys ever want to check out Right Chain, I got the URL there. It's ryt.io. Check that out. That's the site that you guys would want more information about Jeff Mahony and what the technology and what they're working on. So Jeff, thank you so much for this. This is great.
Appreciate the time, Brandon. Hope you have a great day, and thanks for bringing me on.
Oh, you're welcome.
All right.
Here. So that was one of the interesting conversations we had. We're really talking about like data integrity. We're talking about blockchain. We're talking about like everything that's going on, in today's industry. Like you're looking at every challenge that you deal with when you look at your identity, your documents, your data, your confidentiality. Like all these things are extremely important. Like, and just talking about the solution that they are having, how we're seeing how it's being implemented across all different industries. I know we talked about finance, government, but I'm sure it's transportation. You look at government, policing, things along that line, healthcare, manufacturing. I mean, I think you could use it in any industry when you're looking at protecting data integrity and really kind of doing that. So something I really want to press upon you is to look into this, really understand how you're protecting your data. Because this is one of the solutions that I've been seeing on myself, is just something more and more companies want to understand: data classification, data security. Like, you look at confidentiality, integrity, and availability. That CI triad they talk about. This is exactly what we're looking at, and how to protect data. So this was a great episode. I was really excited about it. So don't forget, software's hackable, being connected is vulnerable. I'll see you next Daily Cyber.